I want to share what happened to me last Christmas Eve, a night that fundamentally changed how I understood family. My name is Desmond Hartwell, and at 59 years old, I found myself preparing an elaborate holiday dinner in my Seattle kitchen that no one would come to eat. The kitchen smelled wonderful that evening, filled with the aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon. I had set the table for 9 people, including 2 special small chairs I had purchased for my grandchildren, Jasper and Meadow. I was by myself, but I need to make something clear right away. There's an important distinction between being alone and being lonely. After losing my wife Eleanor 6 years earlier, I had rebuilt a meaningful existence. I taught cooking classes every Thursday, maintained a food blog that actually had readers, played chess with my friend Leonard every Tuesday, and had developed genuine friendships. I had found purpose again. I wasn't some pathetic elderly man sitting by the window desperately waiting for children who never appeared. This particular evening was supposed to be different, though. 2 weeks before Christmas, I had invited my entire family to dinner. That included my 3 children, Thaddeus, who was 34 and married to Vivian with 2 kids of their own, Mitchell at 31, and Cressida, my youngest, at 27. I wanted the whole family together again, like we used to be when Eleanor was alive. Their responses in our family group chat had been disappointingly brief. Thaddeus had written maybe, Mitchell sent only a thumbs-up emoji, and Cressida didn't even bother opening the message for 3 entire days. Despite their lukewarm responses, I chose to remain hopeful. I spent 3 full days preparing everything. The turkey had been brining since Monday. I made Eleanor's special cranberry sauce using her recipe with orange zest and bourbon. I prepared Yukon Gold mashed potatoes and green bean casserole. I baked a pumpkin pie with a crust so perfectly flaky it could bring tears to your eyes. Every single detail had to be absolutely perfect. Bing Crosby's White Christmas played softly from my old radio. Through the kitchen window I could see my neighbor's children building a snowman despite the cold Seattle rain. The turkey rested golden and beautiful on Eleanor's grandmother's heirloom platter, the special one we only brought out for important occasions. By 7:30 that evening, I wiped my hands on my apron and checked my phone, thinking perhaps they were running late. Traffic on Interstate 5 can be absolutely terrible on Christmas Eve. The screen showed new messages in the Hartwell family chat, and my heart jumped with anticipation. Cressida had written a message asking if they really had to go, calling me an unbearable old man and saying nobody wanted to spend Christmas with me. Thaddeus replied that he had told Vivian they would be at her parents' place, and she would be furious if he changed plans. Mitchell added that I would guilt-trip them regardless, and suggested they should let me eat alone. My youngest son had even added a laughing emoji to his cruel message. I read those words once, then twice, then 3 times, as if reading them repeatedly might somehow rearrange them into something less devastating. My thumb hovered over the screen, ready to type a message pointing out that they had sent this to the wrong chat, and I could see everything. But I didn't send anything. I set the phone down slowly. My hands remained steady, which surprised me. When Eleanor had died, I collapsed in that hospital hallway, completely unable to breathe. This felt entirely different, colder somehow, cleaner. It was like a blade sliding between ribs so sharp you don't initially feel the pain. I looked at the dining room. 9 place settings sat there, candles waited to be lit. The good china was arranged perfectly. Those 2 small chairs were positioned carefully so Jasper and Meadow could reach the table properly. All of this had been prepared for people who had been laughing about letting me eat alone. The radio started playing a song about being home for Christmas, and the irony nearly broke me. Nearly. Instead, I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dimming evening light. If my children thought this was the end of things, if they believed they could discard me like yesterday's leftovers and face no consequences whatsoever, they had absolutely no idea what was about to begin. Sitting in my quiet kitchen, I realized this disrespect wasn't something new. It had been building steadily for years. I had just kept making excuses for them. Thaddeus, my eldest son, had borrowed $50,000 from me 3 years ago for what he called an investment opportunity. He never paid back a single cent. Now he only called when he needed me to babysit Jasper and Meadow. I would drop everything, feed them dinner, and tuck them into bed. He would pick them up hours late, mumble a quick thanks, and then disappear for months at a time. Mitchell had taken $20,000 2 years ago for a real estate scheme. He lost every penny of it. Somehow that became my fault in his mind. He actually told me I should have warned him it was risky. He was 31 years old. When exactly did I become responsible for his poor decisions? Then there was Cressida, my youngest at 27. She was polished and perfect, with her social media life curated down to the last detail. I discovered last year that she had stopped inviting me to her events. Her friend had asked casually if I hadn't been there, revealing the truth. A retired chef in an apron didn't fit Cressida's carefully constructed aesthetic. I wasn't considered worthy of appearing on Instagram. I had made excuses for all three of them for far too long. They're busy building their own lives, I would tell myself. They don't mean to be hurtful. But that text message calling me an unbearable old man, and especially that laughing emoji, that was intentional cruelty. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Dante Rivera, the 23-year-old son of my chess buddy Leonard. I had helped Dante out the previous year when he lost his job, letting him stay in my guest room completely rent-free. He answered on the second ring, and I asked if he could come over because I needed help from someone who understood cameras and live streaming. There was a pause, then he asked if everything was okay. I told him I needed him to come over that night. He asked what was going on, and I explained that I needed someone who was tech-savvy. He arrived at my house within 20 minutes, looking concerned. I was still wearing my apron, with the dining room table perfectly set behind me. He asked what was happening, and I told him I needed him to set up a camera because I was going to eat Christmas dinner alone, and I wanted people to see it. His eyes widened as he asked if I meant to live stream it. I confirmed that was exactly what I meant. He asked if my kids hadn't shown up, and I told him it was something like that. He didn't ask more questions. Perhaps he saw something in my expression that told him not to push. Instead, he unpacked his phone and a small ring light from his car. He positioned everything carefully so the shot would frame me, the full table, the empty chairs, and those 2 small seats meant for Jasper and Meadow. He asked which platform I wanted to use, and I told him whichever one would reach the most people. He nodded and suggested social media. He asked what title I wanted, and I thought for a moment before telling him to call it Eating Christmas Dinner Alone, A Father's Story. Dante's jaw tightened as he typed it in. He counted down from 3, and then the red dot appeared indicating we were live. I sat at the head of the table, surrounded by 9 empty place settings. The turkey steamed, the candles flickered, and I began to speak with a steady voice. I introduced myself and explained that I had prepared this meal for my family, including my 3 children, my daughter-in-law, and my 2 grandchildren. I gestured to the empty chairs and noted that I was eating alone. I didn't rant or cry. I simply carved the turkey, served myself, and told the truth about the years of sacrifice, the money that was never repaid, the grandchildren I rarely got to see, and the message I had read that night. Dante watched silently, his expression hardening. In the corner of his screen, the viewer count began to climb rapidly. Within 30 minutes, 5,000 people were watching. By midnight, that number had reached 2 million. I hadn't planned to go viral. I had simply planned to eat dinner. The internet, however, had other plans entirely. Christmas morning arrived, and I woke to a sound I hadn't heard in years. My phone was buzzing nonstop like an angry swarm of bees. I reached for it, squinting at the screen. Notifications were pouring in faster than I could possibly read them. Messages, emails, comments by the thousands. The video from the previous night, the one Dante had streamed, had accumulated 5 million views. 5 million people had watched me eat dinner alone. I sat up fully awake now. My quiet Christmas dinner had transformed into something massive. The comments scrolled endlessly. Most were kind, with people expressing fury on my behalf. They said it broke their hearts, that my children should be ashamed, that they were calling their own mothers immediately. Others had tagged news outlets, and those outlets had responded. Headlines already filled my feed describing an elderly father eating Christmas alone after his children mocked him, and how a chef's lonely dinner had gone viral. I remembered what I had said during that live stream. Dante's camera had captured everything: the full table, the empty chairs, and my calm voice explaining the situation. I had said that my 3 children were supposed to be there that night but chose not to come, though I remained grateful for the meal, for my life, and for those who still valued family. They were simple, honest words. Apparently, they had struck a nerve with millions of people. But the internet didn't stop at sympathy. It became an investigation. Someone recognized my last name and found Thaddeus's LinkedIn profile. From there, they discovered Mitchell's real estate website and Cressida's social media accounts. Screenshots spread rapidly across the internet. People were identifying them as the ungrateful children, saying they couldn't imagine treating their father this way. Then I saw a screenshot of our family group chat, the one from Christmas Eve, with the message calling me an unbearable old man and saying nobody wanted to spend Christmas with me, including that laughing emoji. It was public now. Dante must have shared it, probably claiming it was accidental. But there it was regardless. It was proof that this wasn't fiction, but documented cruelty. My phone rang and it was Leonard. He asked if I had seen what was happening online. I told him I had seen it, and he insisted that I meet him and others at Fletcher's Coffee in an hour because I shouldn't be alone. At 10 o'clock, I walked into the coffee shop. Leonard was there along with Roderick and Francesca. They all stood when I entered. Francesca hugged me tightly and said everyone had seen the video. We sat down together, and Roderick slid a coffee toward me. He said I had done the right thing by showing people what was actually happening. I admitted that I hadn't planned any of this. I had just wanted someone to witness what was happening, to validate that I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt. Leonard pointed out that 5 million people had witnessed it, and they were all on my side. Francesca sighed and mentioned that my children's phones must be exploding because people were furious. I should have felt guilty about what was happening. I didn't. I felt something cold and quiet that felt like justice. Roderick said they deserved it because they had mocked me publicly, and now the public was responding. We talked for an hour. They told me about comments they had read and stories about others who had reconnected with their parents after watching my video. As we stood to leave, my phone rang again with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but decided to answer. A man introduced himself as Atticus Pemberton, an attorney in Seattle. I immediately said I wasn't suing anyone. He replied evenly that this wasn't why he was calling. He had been following my story and needed to discuss my estate and protecting my assets. I asked what he meant by protecting them. He explained that he meant protecting them from people who might suddenly want to reconcile, specifically people named Thaddeus, Mitchell, and Cressida Hartwell. A cold understanding settled over me as I realized what he was suggesting. Christmas afternoon arrived, and at 1 o'clock Thaddeus called first. I let it ring 3 times before answering. His voice was tense as he demanded that I take down the video immediately. I explained calmly that it was a live stream and I couldn't undo what 5 million people had already seen. He made a strangled sound when he heard that number and asked if I realized what I had done. He said people were attacking him online, that Vivian's parents were furious, and that his boss had called him on Christmas morning saying the bank couldn't have employees tied to public scandals. I simply pointed out that I had eaten dinner alone on Christmas Eve. He accused me of making them look like terrible people. I asked whether I had done that or whether they had done it themselves. There was silence. Then he said this wasn't fair and that I was being vindictive. I noted that being vindictive would have been posting their messages myself, but I didn't do that. Someone else did. Thaddeus hung up. At 2 o'clock, Mitchell called. Without any greeting, he asked what was wrong with me. He demanded to know if I realized how many clients he had lost that day. 4 clients, he said. Everyone thought he was some heartless son who had abandoned his father on Christmas. I pointed out that he did abandon me on Christmas. He exhaled sharply and said I was destroying his business. I told him I was done lying for him. He hung up with a curse. At 3 o'clock, Cressida called. Her voice was small and trembling. She said she was so sorry about the text and about everything. She had lost 2 brand deals that day, and her Instagram was full of hate. She begged me to fix it. I asked if it was a misunderstanding when she didn't invite me to her gallery opening, when she told her friend I wasn't aesthetic enough for her life. The truth was out now, and what happened next was up to them. That evening, I called Atticus Pemberton and told him I was ready to make changes to my estate plan. On December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, I arrived at Atticus's law office on the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown. I told him I wanted to make 3 specific changes. First, Thaddeus, Mitchell, and Cressida would receive only the legal minimum required by law. The rest would go to the Abandoned Parents Foundation, an organization that helps estranged parents. Second, I wanted to establish trust funds for my grandchildren, $200,000 each that their parents couldn't touch. They were innocent, and I wouldn't punish them for who raised them. Third, I was selling my house. It was too big and held too many memories I no longer wanted. Atticus pointed out that this meant my children would inherit almost nothing. I told him they had disinherited themselves when they laughed about me eating alone on Christmas. Then my phone rang with an unknown number. A woman introduced herself as Sloan Garrison, a producer with a cooking and lifestyle network. She had seen my video, along with 20 million other people. She wanted to discuss creating a series with me focused on cooking and storytelling. Within a week, I had signed 2 contracts, one with Atticus protecting my assets and my grandchildren's future, and one with Sloan giving me a purpose I hadn't expected. The consequences arrived faster than I expected in early January. My neighbor Beatrix told me Thaddeus had been fired from the bank. Clients had threatened to pull their accounts if he stayed. Roderick's nephew in real estate said Mitchell's business was crashing. He had lost 3 big deals in a single week, and debt collectors were calling. It turned out he had been living entirely on credit. Leonard mentioned that Cressida had lost all her brand partnerships. Her manager had dropped her, and she had lost her apartment because she couldn't pay rent. Then Beatrix returned with news that Thaddeus's wife was demanding a divorce, and he was about to lose custody. That evening, alone in my apartment, I watched Seattle rain trace patterns on the glass. My children's worlds were collapsing. I had known it might happen and had even prepared for it. But I hadn't prepared for how it would actually feel. Not joy, not revenge, but something quieter, a blend of grief and relief. My phone buzzed with one missed call from Sloan Garrison. While my children's worlds were falling apart, mine was just beginning to bloom. In late January, the studio lights were brighter than I expected, but somehow standing in front of that camera felt like coming home. The first episode of Savoring Life with Desmond Hartwell was titled The Christmas Dinner That Changed Everything. I told my story while butterflying a chicken, talking about sacrifice and boundaries and what happens when love becomes one-sided. I made my mother's lemon herb roasted chicken, the same recipe I had taught my children when they were small. The episode aired on February 1st. 8 million people watched. Working with Sloan was easy in a way I hadn't expected. She was 55, divorced 3 years with no children of her own. She understood loss, not the same kind I had experienced, but loss nonetheless. Her ex-husband had chosen his career over their marriage, and she had chosen herself afterward. We worked late hours editing episodes, testing recipes, and debating whether a story was too raw or not raw enough. She laughed at my jokes, and I appreciated her directness. There was no pretense between us, no performance, just 2 people rebuilding their lives one frame, one conversation, and one meal at a time. In mid-February, the house sold. The same house where I had raised Thaddeus, Mitchell, and Cressida. The same house where Eleanor and I had danced in the kitchen on our 20th anniversary. I didn't cry when I signed the papers. I felt lighter. I bought a 2-bedroom apartment in Fremont, smaller and modern with huge windows that let in the Seattle winter light. It was mine with no ghosts and no obligations, just possibility. On February 20th, I threw a housewarming party. Leonard brought wine, Roderick brought his famous potato salad, and Francesca brought flowers and a fierce hug. Leonard raised his glass in my tiny living room and toasted to new beginnings. We ate, we laughed, and we told stories. At one point, Roderick pulled me aside quietly and said he hadn't seen me this alive since before Eleanor passed, not even when she was still here. He said I was free. They left around 10 o'clock. I cleaned up, poured myself a whiskey, and sat by the window watching the city lights flicker in the distance. My phone rang, showing Thaddeus's home number as the caller identification. I hesitated with my hand hovering over the screen. Then I answered. A small, young, uncertain voice said, "Grandpa." It was Jasper, and my throat tightened. He said it was him and that he missed me. He asked if he could come visit sometime, just him and Meadow. He said his dad had told him it was okay if I said yes. I closed my eyes and took a breath before telling him softly that of course he could, anytime he wanted. He said he loved me, and I told him I loved him too. 2 weeks later, 3 letters arrived at my doorstep. They were handwritten and unexpected, one from Thaddeus, one from Mitchell, and one from Cressida. In early March, the letters sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I opened them. Thaddeus's letter explained that he had lost his job and that Vivian had left him, taking half of everything. He was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment with Jasper and Meadow now. For the first time in years, he was actually being a father, making breakfast, reading bedtime stories, and helping with homework. He wrote that he could now see how he had treated me, like an ATM and an obligation. He said I deserved so much better. He was in therapy now, not to win me back, but because he needed to be better for his kids. He was sorry, not because he wanted something, but because I deserved to hear it years ago. I set the letter down, took a breath, and opened the second one. Mitchell's letter admitted he had been living a lie. The fancy cars, expensive dinners, and designer clothes were all purchased with debt. He had lost everything, and honestly, it was the best thing that ever happened to him. He had gotten a job as a line cook at a small restaurant. It was humbling but honest work. He acknowledged that I had taught him the value of that when he was young, but he had forgotten. He was sorry for taking my money and blaming me when he lost it. He promised to pay back every cent, even if it took him 20 years. The third envelope was lighter. Cressida's letter confessed that she had spent her whole life chasing validation from strangers on the internet. She had been ashamed of me because I wasn't worthy of Instagram. She had deleted all her social media accounts. She was working at a bookstore now and learning to value real things, real books, real conversations, real people. She wanted to learn to value herself too, and maybe if I would let her, learn to value me again. Not because I had gone viral, but because I was her dad. I folded the letters carefully and set them in a neat stack on the table. I felt relief that they finally understood. I felt sadness that it had taken this much pain. I felt acceptance that my new life was good with or without their growth, but I also felt something else, something fragile and unexpected. Hope. I didn't respond immediately. Some wounds need time and some lessons need space. But 3 months later, on a sunny afternoon in May, I picked up my phone and made a call. 6 months after that Christmas dinner, I stood at a different table, and this time I wasn't alone. In June, at the Seattle Community Center, 25 students sat around the kitchen watching me butterfly a chicken breast. Sloan stood beside me with the camera rolling for our show. This was my life now. After class, we sat in the quiet kitchen sipping coffee. Sloan asked softly if I had decided about the letters. I told her yes, that I had called Thaddeus the previous week and was meeting Jasper and Meadow the following Saturday, just the kids first. On June 15th, at a park near Green Lake, Jasper and Meadow spotted me from across the grass and sprinted toward me. They crashed into me with their arms tight around me. Jasper said proudly that his dad was different now, making pancakes every Sunday, reading to them, and even coming to his soccer game. Meadow asked if I was still mad at her daddy. I knelt down to meet her eyes and told her no. I wasn't mad, but things were different now, and that was okay. I explained that they were different in a good way, that we were learning how to love each other better. I agreed to see my children again, but on my terms. Neutral places, once a month maybe. I told Thaddeus that night that he was welcome in my life, but he was no longer the center of it. I had friends, Sloan, my work, and myself. He was part of my life, not all of it. He said he understood and that it was fair. People ask if I forgive my children. Yes, I do. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It doesn't make things the same as they were. They broke something precious, and even when repaired, you still see the cracks. The cracks remind you to be gentle, to value what's fragile, and to never take love for granted again. That evening in my apartment, Sloan arrived with wine and ingredients for pasta carbonara. We moved together like dancers in rhythm. My phone buzzed with a video from Jasper saying he loved me. I smiled, sent a heart emoji, and set the phone down. I turned back to Sloan, to the meal, to the warmth of her hand brushing mine, to my real life finally. Some stories end with everyone together. Mine ended with me whole, and that was enough. Looking back, I spent years hoping my children would see my worth when I should have seen it myself. Don't wait for a breaking point to set boundaries. Your value isn't measured by how much your children need you. Boundaries aren't walls, but bridges to healthier relationships. Wholeness matters more than togetherness. You're worth choosing.